my tarot friends, Justin Michael. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome, of course, if it's your first time visiting. I appreciate you, as always. I hope everybody's doing well. It's very hot here in Philadelphia. I do have a fan on, you might hear. Hopefully it's not too noisy. I do have a mic, but, you know, I can't do without it. I apologize. So I'm going to attempt to show you my Grimaud collection today. I'm going to try and keep the video relatively short, but I do have 5 decks in front of me. Which is not all of my Grimaud decks, but they're the ones I think are, you know, at least the vintage ones are the more highly sought after ones, the more common ones you'll see on eBay and so forth, and the ones I believe that are worth looking for, as well as a modern deck which was printed, you know, about a couple years ago, which is now published by Cartamundi, because Grimaud is no longer a company anymore. You know, they were sold to Cartamundi, I believe. Cartamundi has the exclusive right to Grimaud decks. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I know that they print the Ancien Tarot de Marseille. So I talk a lot about how, you know, one of my favorite parts of my tarot collection is my mass market Tarot de Marseille collection. I really love the, you know, great restorations on all the historic decks and so forth. I love that, but that's really not part of my favorite part of the collection. My favorite part of the collection is like these really cool Marseille decks. They're the ones I pull out time and time again, and I look at them. They're like my heart and soul of my collection, and probably the most important and definitely probably my most treasured possession in all of my tarot collection is this deck right here, which is a post-war version of the Grimaud. So the Grimaud deck was originally published in 1930. The 1930 version is very unique. It's rare. It's really hard to get, and you know you can pay anywhere from $500 to $1,000 for a copy, and probably closer to $1,000 these days because of the market. I wish I would have gotten one a few years ago, but I just didn't realize, you know, how much I would really love this deck. And you know, who knows, maybe I'll come across one day, but this one is almost as good. So this is like after World War II, sometime like the late 40s through the 50s, before 63. They call it a pre-1963 Grimaud. The backs are like so, and it's like a basket weave pattern, as opposed to the current one, which I'll show you in a minute. But the card stock is so amazing. And someone once told me that the industrial version of the Convert was on the same exact card stock, but this card stock is like nothing I have. It feels like something that was handmade. It's very heavy, and the cards just have this amazing feel. I can't really explain it, but this is my most prized possession in my collection. The 1930, I have a facsimile here, which I printed myself. I got the images from the Bibliothèque Nationale France, which you can, you know, I'll link that below if you want to look at the original images. For my purposes here today, I'm just going to draw on them and just show you a few things so it'll work fine. I wish I had a real copy to show you, but I don't. I have this version here, which is the green box. You'll see it's going on eBay now for like a lot of money, a lot more than it should be, honestly. I would never pay $500 for this, but I saw it going for $500 on eBay recently. And this one too is priced pretty crazy. And you know, the green box, you know, we're going to take a look at the cards, but the green box it's super thick, and it's really, really cool. So I don't want to tell you too much because we're going to look at it. But the red box is another one you'll see, and then again, this is the current version. So the reason I feel like this is the most important deck in my collection is because this deck is really what put Tarot de Marseille back on the map. And I mean it like quite literally. Like, Tarot de Marseille was totally lost and forgotten. The game of tarot, which is still played in France today, but after World War I, like, for some reason, French tarot players stopped using the Tarot de Marseille type tarot deck. They started using French suited pips and like animal decks and so forth for the game. I guess it was easier to play the game. I'm not really sure. I think in Switzerland it started happening first, and I don't know, sometime during World War I, I guess, with all the mixing up of you know, all the allies and so forth, maybe it just something that, you know, rubbed off, and went back to France, because in France for the longest time they were really holding on to the traditional Tarot de Marseille, but then after World War One, it's like done. So Grimaud was printing a Besançon, what we call Besançon today. They didn't call it a Besançon back then, for the most part, but it's the Arnault deck. This was printed in like 1891. It was originally printed by Lacourt. We call it the Arnault. Very cool colors and so forth. The major difference is that instead of the Papess we have Juno, and instead of the Pope we have Jupiter, which are figures from Greek Roman mythology, but pretty much the same line work otherwise. This was being printed by Grimaud, and so when Paul Marteau, okay, so he gets involved with the company around 1912. He's the nephew of B.P. Grimaud, of Baptiste Paul Grimaud. His father, Leo, was really involved in the company, and around 1912, this is when, Paul Marteau gets involved in the company. He wasn't really, visible within the company, at least in terms of what we could see. Now, I'm going to leave an article down below. It's by a fellow named Boucher, who is, I probably pronounced his name wrong, but just check down below. He's a curator of a playing card museum near Paris. He wrote this article. It was translated by a friend of mine, Ronan, from the Tarot History Group. It does a lot of great translations of obscure French documents. I'm going to link his stuff below as well, so check him out. But this article is great because it talks all about Paul Marteau and his influence. I want to try and give you the short, interesting version. So Paul Marteau is exposed to occultism very early on. So by 1912, when he gets involved and eventually takes over part of the company, because he inherited the company, as well as some other relatives and some other people. There were several people involved in the company, so he wasn't the sole owner. I don't know the extent of the shares he owned or whatever, but I do know there were multiple owners. And he was pretty much a social lady. He wasn't really involved like his father was, according to the article I read. He had a lot of money and he just kind of enjoyed life. He had a lot of time to research and explore his passions and things he was interested in, like occultism. He was exposed to it very early on. His uncle George was a card collector. He was into rare Eastern objects and so forth. And then he grew up in this interwar period. He comes of age in the interwar, what we call the interwar period, which is the period between World War I and World War II. After World War I, there's this great resurgence of occultism, and spiritualism. That's when you see Pappas and all these other figures. Oswald Wirth sort of at the tail end of it, and they all were sort of ran in all the same occult circles. And so Paul Marteau is one of them. He began to really get strong opinions about the tarot. And so all these occultists, they saw the tarot as, holding this veiled kind of tradition that goes back to the ancients. And I believe both Oswald Wirth and Pappas both say, in more or less terms, that the Tarot de Marseille was, the purest form of this. It was the most important, and that philosophy kind of carried over even into the modern day. I mean, we see guys like Ben Dove who put a lot of emphasis on the Convert, and Jodorowsky and Camwan, Philippe Camwan, the new Camwan. It's even exists today, and a lot of people still believe that the tarot holds this, the keys or whatever to life itself or whatever, So he gets these strong opinions, and he's involved with Grimaud. Around 1928 is when he starts feeling strongly about the tarot. 1930 he publishes the Ancien Tarot de Marseille. It's called the Ancien Tarot de Marseille not because it's the ancient tarot, but because it's the tarot from the Ancien regime in France, is what I read. And so the Ancien regime was, of course, feudalistic France, King Louis, and the pre-revolutionary France. And so that's where the name comes from. The iconic circle and triangle, I don't know what that means, but that's what you see on all the earlier decks. The superimposed circle and triangle. You see a similar symbol in AA, and I think it has something to do with the perfection of the mind and the body. Like the triangle it's the most stable shape. And that's probably why they have it in AA, because it's represents the body, and then a sober body and a sober mind kind of thing. Grimaud is already printing the Arnault, and him and I think a few others refer to this deck as the Italian deck, which is odd. They haven't called it yet a Besançon, but he has a real problem with the colors. And then he wants to replace Juno and Jupiter. So at some point he goes to KM1, who was at the time printing the Nicolas Colombier. He had bought the blocks from Colombier, and he was printing this famous deck here, this is the Lo Scarabeo version. This is the deck that inspired the current Grimaud, the Ancien Tarot de Marseille. Actually, nobody would probably even know about this deck if it wasn't for Paul Marteau in his book, 1949. He refers to this deck as, the deck that held most loyally the ancient traditions and so forth. And like I said, there wasn't much. It was a lost deck of cards because they weren't using them anymore for games. And you had occultists making decks here and there, like you had Oswald Wirth in the late 1800s did his first deck, and then he reprinted the second deck. But you didn't have this style readily available. We have many more Tarot de Marseilles available to us today than they had back then. Because it was a bigger world, you didn't have all these museums and stuff, and it was just a rare thing. And so that was the one that was printed by Grimaud by Arnault was the only one that was around. Of course, if you watch the interview with Yves Ronan that I did, he shows. So the Arnault was printed by Lecourt, which was bought out by Grimaud, right? But Yves Ronan has a rare Lecourt deck, which is almost the same as this one, but it's hand painted, stenciled, and it has the Pope and Popess. So it's kind of cool if you want to go back and check that out, the interview. But anyway, so that's it. So Paul Marteau comes up with this deck. He publishes it in 1930, and he writes the book in 1949, which is called the Tarot de Marseille, and then it brings back the term Tarot de Marseille. He brings it to the forefront. This is the book. This book was translated by Marius. I'm going to link it below. Marius Haagensen. I'll put that information below. I rebound it, and I screwed the first page up because it was my first time ever binding them. But this was the first ever book I ever bound, and of course I got a lot better at it. I mean, I didn't do too bad of a job, but I could have did better. But one of these days I'm going to rebind it probably, and make it a little fancier. I might actually buy a colored version. When it was printed originally, it had actual pictures of the cards glued in there and stuff. So that would be cool. Maybe I can recreate it somehow like that. So anyway, let's take a look at the cards. So yeah, I mean, Paul Marteau's this important figure for a lot of reasons. His book is very interesting. I haven't really studied it too much. A lot of it's kind of antiquated and very esoteric, but there's a lot of cool stuff about numerology in there and about the colors, and it is a bit helpful. and I can see where Ben Dove got a lot of his information from, and you know, his style. The one other deck I want to show you before we get started is this deck here. It's comes in this box, very, very nice box. Not printed by Grimaud, but it's by Editions Trajector. I couldn't resist it. It's a gold gilded version of the deck. I just want to show you that real quick before I get started with the comparison. Okay, so it has this box here. I mean, this book, which is all in French, actually. Well, it's kind of cool. And then it comes like this. And it's really, really gilded in gold, but square corners, which is kind of cool. The cardstock is nothing fancy at all, but it's kind of nice. And the blues actually look a little better than the current. It's a tiny bit better. They're still dark, but anyway, we'll get to that. So the order of the decks I have here is from oldest to newest. This is the green box. It was printed in 1969. It's very, very thick cardstock, you know, and that's one of the great parts of it. But it also has some really cool color characteristics that, you know, make me really love the deck. And it comes with this book. This is the booklet here, very, very old. Another thing about this deck too is it was printed. And probably the first Tarot de Marseille, like traditional Tarot de Marseille, ever printed specifically for cartomancy. This is the red box here, which, you know, comes in this red box. This is after 69, so probably sometime in the 70s this was made. I don't know the exact dates. There is, the only thing we don't have like much, but there is a blog post that sort of categorizes each of these decks. And so that's part of the reason I wanted to do this, because there's just not much information on this deck. It's like, you know, one of the most popular tarot decks ever, but there's not a whole lot of information on the history and all the different versions and so forth. The other version I have is an 80s version, which is almost identical to the current version, but it's very orange. Look how orange that is. You know, I mean, the reds are really very orange. It makes it kind of unique. I mean, look at the tower. Look how orange those colors are, and it makes me kind of like it a little more, and that, you know, it has this unique quality to it. But very, very orange. Look at the cups. You know, really very orange looking. So. But other than that, it's identical to this. So we're going to stick to this one, and we're just going to kind of look at the majors, and I'm going to show you a couple of important pips and maybe peruse through them. This deck is my favorite in terms of color that I have. Obviously, if I had an original 1930, that would be my favorite. It's more of a powdered blue, although I've seen pictures of the 1930 deck with like almost a turquoise color. And it varies, and it's probably because of, you know, the inconsistency of printers back then, you know, talking about 1930. And then this is a post-war. This is anywhere from like late 40s, early 50s, certainly before 1963 when they changed the copyright. On the 1930, you have BP Grimaud Paris on the post-war, and then this is the green box. You just have BP Grimaud, and the same in the others as well. So one of my main issues with the current deck is that the blues are really, really dark. The colors are dark in general. The lines are a little blurry. And it's the same for the red deck. The red deck is not much better. That's why I say I think it's way overpriced, because you're not getting like the amazing colors of like the of these versions. You're getting something that's maybe slightly better. It's even debatable, but the cardstock's really thick, so that's one of the selling points. But I would never pay too much money for the red deck. I just wouldn't, knowing what I know. And I hope this helps you in deciding. So, well, let's take a look here. So the first thing we see here with the Magician is The 1930 version has no dice on the table, whereas all the other cards have the dice. That's one of the main differences, aside from the unique colors of the 1930. It doesn't have any dice on there, and I think it's possible that it's, you know, more similar to what we see in the Camoin Convert, the 1880. So I mean, it's possible. I don't know why they added the dice, but they did. Also, with this card stock too, one thing I noticed is that the top card was darker than the bottom cards. And my theory is that because this was exposed to the air, and it probably sat in a drawer or something for 70 years, and the top card just got browner. And that helps us understand why the 1930 is so brown in this. It probably wasn't. It probably was originally like slightly off white. Probably wasn't exactly brown, but over time they turn brown. So just looking at the papers, I mean, this gives you a really good idea of the differences in the deck. So if you look at the 1930, it's that very powdered blue with almost a burgundy red, which is absolutely beautiful. And I absolutely love this deck. Like, the color blues in this are almost as good as the 1930. Especially compared to this. Now the green box is actually not bad compared to these ones, but you see here, I mean, the darkness is just something that makes it hard to really love it, you know. I mean, I use these a lot, and I'm not like I love the modern deck in a way, you know. It's a workhorse for me, but in the same sense, I just wish that Cartamundi would redo. You know, it's about time they redo the 1930 anyway, but it'd be nice to see them clean up the images a little bit. My one disappointment about the green box is that it's in English, but I mean, it doesn't bother me too much, but it's still a bit annoying. Whoop. Yeah, I mean, look at that blue. That's just so nice. It's amazing. Okay. So the plate is interesting on the chariot. It's something I don't know too much about. Obviously, it's just a guess. But, you know, the SM, obviously M is probably Marteau. Maybe he went with Saul, like, you know, Saul Marteau, like, you know, sort of biblical. It's just a guess. I have no idea. If anybody knows or has any comments, questions, whatever, please leave them below. I'd like to know about that. I couldn't find anything. And there's a lot like that about this, especially when it comes to the changes. Like, they're just things that I'm just not going to know. Okay, we have the Hermit. It's interesting. You see more of the lantern in this, in these later versions, whereas in the post-war and the 1930, they look very similar. Like, there's not. It's kind of cut off the lantern, so that's kind of interesting. I never noticed that before. This is actually my first comparison doing it this way. I've never actually looked at all of these versions like this, and I always learn a lot doing this. Okay, so we have the wheel. I mean, you can't even see the details in this is the red box and this is the current, and you can't even see the features of the monkey. It's really annoying. Okay. Strength. The green box looks great. The blues look great. I would say it's much better, the green box, but I don't believe the red box is worth paying a lot of money for, because I think that you're essentially getting the same as the modern deck, just on thicker cards, and the cards aren't even as thick as the green box. I mean, I love that. Like, if you look at the blues on here, even the hair, it's so much darker, whereas this one is very similar to what we see in 1930 and in the post-war. Okay, so this is a strange one for the green box. I have the English version, obviously, so it's probably not going to be... But why did they do that? I mean, I have no idea why they added the word death there. Really annoying, but again, it's just what they did, and you know, as if the person needed that word there to know that it's death. I mean, especially since it's supposed to be a deck for cartomancy, and you know, it's highly symbolic that the death card never gets the word death on there. You know what I mean? I don't know. We got temperance. Anything else with the majors? I thought there might have been something with the sword and the devil, but I can't really tell. You know what's great about this version? First off, the colors are amazing, but there's a lot of imperfections in the colors, as if it was like a stenciled deck. You know, it doesn't have the perfection of the lines that you have in the others, because it was probably colored by plates, you know. And it, you know, for instance, let me show you the magician really quickly. Like, this is a perfect example. You have the paint coming out in the legs, and then right here you have where the yellow is. You know, you have like yellow going up in there, and it almost resembles a stenciled deck. I don't know. It's just something I really appreciate about it, and it just has such a great feel, that deck. And we have the tower. Okay, this one is like, wow. I mean, is that like heartbreaking or what? I mean, look at these three compared to those two. It's just like, it's like night and day, you know? Just no surprise to me that the green box is going for $500 on eBay now. I really love the sun card in this deck, and in the Convert, which is where it comes from. You know, I always love the sun, just kind of, I can't really explain it, but it's just something with the geometric shape of the sun is just so perfect. The sun just looks absolutely perfect. I can't really explain it, but probably my favorite sun. I do love the sun in the Club Bordel too, but it's got to be one of my favorite suns in the tarot deck. Judgment. And please leave your comments below if you see something I don't. You know, there's very possible differences. In the world. Okay, so there's no full for the 1930 because when I printed it, I just didn't print a full. It was an oversight. But it's not really that important anyway. But you get the picture. I mean, these three are just amazing in terms of the color blue. This is my favorite, only because, you know, I own the actual deck. If I had the actual 1930, I'd probably feel the same. But I'm very happy to have this. You know, I'm very, very happy to have this in my collection. It's just so much different than all the others. Okay. I mean, look at that green in the pips. Is that not, like, annoying? Okay, so now I want to show you a couple of the pips here, which I know for a fact have changed. There may be some others. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I want to show you a couple of the important ones. The Two of Pentacles, or the Two of Coins rather, I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to show you the Four of Coin. Okay, so the Two of Coins pretty much the same across the board. I mean, other than the tones in color, you know, nothing has been added or taken away from it. But this is really flummoxing, to put it mildly. Like, not exactly sure why they would have done this, particularly since it was done during Marteau's lifetime. And it was done, I think, before he wrote his book. I think somebody said before he wrote his book in 1949 it was done. And he describes the fleur-de-lis in his book. So that's what this is. And you see, if you're, you know, if you watch football in America, you know that the New Orleans Saints has the fleur-de-lis on their helmets. They're called the Saints. Well, that has to do with, like, the House of Bourbon of some sort. You know, I think, like, it's connected to the French king. And you see it in a lot of decks. And like I said, the deck is called the Ancien Tarot de Marseille. It goes back to the period of Louis, you know. And so maybe it just maybe seemed kind of archaic, and they moved it. I don't know. I saw on one of the tarot history discussion boards on the internet, Ross Caldwell had mentioned that, you know, that was a possible reason. You know, maybe they saw it as archaic, which is ridiculous. But nevertheless, they got rid of the fleur-de-lis and put the tulip in there. But the rest of the deck is, you know, they're fairly simple aside from, or similar rather, aside from color. But, you know, I mean, I'm not going to go through all the pips. But anyway, that's about it. Don't have anything else to show you. I hope I got to show you everything. I hope I didn't forget anything. But anyway, I'd love to hear from you. And I hope this was helpful. I hope it gave you an idea, a little piece of the history. Check out the article below. And I'll leave some other stuff down there as well, any information I might have missed or whatever. And like I said, love to hear from you. But anyway, thanks for tuning in, guys. I am interviewing Anatolian on the 2nd of June, which I believe is a Thursday. We're doing it late night, so that's kind of cool, you know. And so we'll be hanging out late night talking tarot. So stay tuned to that. It will be live. I believe it's 10 p.m. But of course, you can always watch the replay. Thanks again, everybody. Love and peace. Bye-bye.